Dickie Dread, New Age Travellers, A History, 1960 to 1990. Chapter 5, The Battle of the Beanfield. A long morning. It was a grey June morning, the kind of sky that holds its breath. In a woodland clearing on the edge of Savannah Forest, a convoy was stirring. Diesel engines coughed into life, kettles whistled on gas rings, dogs barked and smoke curled from chimney flues, punched through the rusted roofs of old buses. There were around 140 vehicles in all, a rough line of painted school buses, horse boxes, ambulances, army trucks and handmade wagons, patched together from years on the road. Families packed up tarps and toys, kids were zipped into sleeping bags or perched cross-legged on dashboards. The mood was tense, but hopeful. Another solstice was coming, another Stonehenge Free Festival, a rite of passage, a gathering of the road's extended family. Some had been at Greenham, some at Windsor, some had never missed a Stonehenge since the 1970s. There were druids, punks, herbalists, poets, and peoples whose names were never caught, but whose faces were as familiar as sunrise over canvas. Phil the Beer was in the lead truck. The school bus, covered in slogans and cartoons, rumbled towards the front, driven by a man known only as Mick, accompanied by crates of vegetables, chalkboards and 3 barefoot children. People checked maps, guessed routes and whispered about roadblocks. Word had spread. Wiltshire police were ready. There was talk of court injunctions and exclusion zones, but there was also confidence, built from years of pushing back. No one believed they'd stop the entire convoy. At 10 a.m, the engines were idling, flags flapped, radios crackled, with half-heard updates. One woman tied a rainbow shawl across the bonnet of a van like a banner. Others daubed fresh slogans on the side of their rigs. We come in peace. Freedom of movement is a right, not a crime. Solstice, not soldiers. And then they moved. A slow roll onto the narrow Wiltshire roads, a ribbon of resistance, 2 miles long, heading west towards the Stones. No one knew that in a few short hours they'd be crawling through a broad Beanfield, surrounded by riot police. But for now the convoy rolled, slow, loud, free. The police, on the other hand, had been gathering significant intelligence. Here's a breakdown. 1. The convoy was heading to Stonehenge. Wiltshire Constabulary knew the convoy was planning to gather for Stonehenge Free Festival, as it had done annually since the mid-1970s. Legal injunctions had been secured days earlier to create a 4-mile exclusion zone around the Stones, and officers had been briefed to enforce it. 2. Vehicle numbers and composition. The convoy had been monitored at Savannah Forest, and police were aware of approximately 140 vehicles, including large buses, horse boxes and live-in trucks. Intelligence noted a mixed population, families with children, punks, anarchists, former Greenham women and travellers with long records of free festival involvement. 3. Leadership and key figures. Police likely had files on several well-known convoy figures, including Sid Rule, although he was less active in the frontline leadership in 1985, Mick, the school bus, and others involved in festival logistics and land negotiations. Convoy organisers had not kept strict hierarchies, making command structures loose, which frustrated formal response tactics. 4. Potential for resistance. Based on prior confrontations, for example Stonehenge 1984, and free site evictions, police expected passive resistance, barricades and attempts to outmanoeuvre roadblocks. Some internal memos, which were later leaked, referred to the travellers as paramilitary in organisation, an exaggerated influence by political pressure and tabloid hysteria. 5. Media narrative. Police intelligence was influenced not just by direct observation, but by press coverage which increasingly framed the convoy as a public health risk, a criminal fraternity and an ideological threat. These narratives were likely emboldened the police to prepare a show of force, as they assumed public support or at least tolerance for cracking down. Operation Daybreak had been previously used as a dry run for convoy disruption, and its structure was revived. Police had coordinated with 6 different forces, deploying around 1,300 officers in advance. Helicopters and spotters were used to track convoy formation and movements. Roadblocks with gravel dumps and strategically parked lorries were prepared along anticipated routes. A rapid deployment plan had been drawn up to block and encircle the convoy once it crossed into Wiltshire. To summarise, police intelligence by the morning of the 1st of June 1985 had identified the convoy's intended destination, vehicle makeup and size, key personalities and anticipated tactics of evasion or resistance. But it also suffered from distorted perceptions, framing the travellers not simply as a cultural movement, but as an unruly, semi-militant threat. There was even talk of the front vehicle members being heavily armed. This inflated threat assessment played a direct role in justifying the overwhelming force used at the Battle of the Beanfield. It is also worth pointing out that the police at the time had been heavily militarised, mainly to combat the miners. This may have given them a justification and a false sense of courage. If you could beat up a load of bastard miners, a bunch of hippies would be a walkover. Dale Vince rode ahead of the convoy on his battered Triumph Bonneville, scanning the Wiltshire lanes for trouble. He wasn't just a motorcycle outrider, he was a scout and a warning system. As he crested a hill near Cholderton, Dale saw the blockade. Police vans stretched across the road, riot gear gleaming in the sunlight. He turned round and sped towards the lead vehicle, closely followed by a police helicopter. He reached Phil in the lead truck and got him to make a turn-off that would inadvertently allow the police to completely box in the convoy. The trap was sprung. It was now around midday. By the time the convoy reached the Wiltshire border, the road had narrowed, hedgerows tight, vision short, nothing but tarmac and sky. Somewhere near Shipton Bellinger, the atmosphere changed. Radios crackled. A child in one of the front wagons reportedly said, "Why have all the birds gone quiet?" And then it came into view. A line of blue and white flashing lights, police vans across the carriageway, gravel heaps dumped hastily to block retreat. A few travellers called it, "It's a trap!" At this point the convoy had stretched well over a mile long. Dozens of heavy vehicles, many with children on board, dogs tied to bumpers, washing lines strung between the wing mirrors. No one expected easy passage, and a few anticipated full tactical containment. The roadblock was meticulously planned. Police vehicles were parked nose to tail, cutting off the road ahead. Gravel and dirt had been tipped onto side trucks to stop vehicles diverting through fields, and officers were positioned in rows, some in riot gear with truncheons drawn, some in plain clothes taking notes. A few wore black gloves, later alleged by legal observers to signify those expected to engage in force. The battle bus and several vehicles with children aboard were near the front. Word spread quickly, back through the line. Some travellers tried to negotiate, approaching officers with their hands visible. Few shouted legal points, quoting the right to peaceful assembly, demanding to see injunction papers. Others, seasoned by years of harassment, began to turn into nearby fields, hedging the convoy off-road to avoid confrontation. Meanwhile, engines idled. Smoke from diesel rigs and wood burners began to rise in slow spirals above the hedges. Banners and flags waved limp. Some played music, the mob and crass blaring from battered cassette decks. Others turned off their stereos and sat in silence. A few young punks were overheard mocking the scene. "Reckon this is Glasgow?" "Nah, mate, this is Wiltshire, and they've had enough of us." Inside the line, officers reported to be tense, aggressive and poorly coordinated. Some were overheard arguing. Others took positions on high ground, allegedly preparing to photograph or catalogue vehicle registrations. But already some were masking their ID badges, an ominous sign and an illegal tactic used against the miners. One witness later described a senior officer giving quiet, rapid briefing. "This isn't a negotiation. This is an operation." The front line had stopped, trapped between the gravel mounds and the police vans. Engines continued to idle. Some travellers climbed onto the roofs to see what lay ahead. Children pressed their faces to smeared windows. There was shouting, but no movement. Then the order came. Without warning, making me feel a bit odd. Officers surged forward. The first bus, a blue and white Bedford with hand-painted peace signs, took the brunt. Police shattered its windscreen with truncheons and crowbars. Screams erupted from inside. One woman held a toddler to her chest, shouting, "There are kids in here!" A riot shield slammed into the side window. Glass rained down. A dog barked madly and yelped. Dale, on his Triumph, dodged between buses and back trucks, shouting warnings. He saw a friend struck to the ground beside his painted van. Officers in black gloves tore open side doors, pulling people out by their arms, hair, legs. Anyone who resisted was thrown down onto the tarmac and cuffed. One young man, hands raised, was still struck across the back of the head. Blood smeared the bonnet. Nearby, the school bus rocked on its wheels as more officers surrounded it. They punched out the driver's side window, reached inside, unlocked the door, and dragged Mick onto the road. Kids inside screamed. One officer slammed the gear stick into reverse to neutralise the vehicle. Witnesses said it was methodical, fast and terrifying. There was no negotiation, no warning, just the sound of boots on gravel, glass breaking, dogs barking, people screaming. Behind them, panic began to spread. Down the line, people realised the front was being crushed and made the only decision they could. A hasty hole was made in the fence next to the road, and they turned off into a field of pasture land next to a beanfield. The convoy splintered. Some vehicles stayed on the tarmac. Many entered the field, aiming to bypass the blockade. This decision would prove pivotal. The field had no exits, no cover, and quickly became a killing jar, a trap without escape.